What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Phenomenal day to you. Welcome on in to the Men of Vision Podcast. I'm your boy, Dwayne Roberts. The Men of Vision Podcast, our aim here is to support Christian men to navigate life challenges by gaining clarity and direction so they can experience happier, healthier, and more purposeful lifestyle. I want to say thank you for taking a vital step towards becoming the best version of you. It's all about personal development, leadership, and spiritual growth. On today's podcast, we're talking with Anthony Curnutt. Anthony is an independent contractor with a passion for ministry. With many years of experience leading men and families, he brings a unique perspective of real men talk. I think I said that right. He started the Real Men Talk as a way to share his knowledge and insight with others who are interested in learning to becoming godly, courageous men, and he created a community of like-minded individuals. Family, help me give a warm virtual welcome to my man, Anthony Curnutt. What's happening, Anthony? How you doing today, bro? Welcome to the Men of Vision Podcast.
Wow, Dwayne, thank you so much, man. It's such an honor to be on here. I love what you're doing here, and this is going to be a great conversation. I'm excited about it.
We're so excited to have you here, man. Well, listen, I know you and I chopped it up some time before we got on it today, and it felt like I was connecting to an old friend or brother. My friend, man, do me a favor, please. Please introduce yourself to the fellas. Let them know who Anthony Curnutt is and how you desire to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I'm a child of God. Jesus Christ is my best friend. I'm a husband of 21 years, father of 6. I do men's ministry. I'm an author, podcaster. We do, entrepreneur. I do a little bit of everything, and I love it. And my goal, my purpose, I would say that God has given me is to pour into men's lives and allow them to see the influence that the God-given influence God has had on their lives, and through that they can become the leaders that God has called them to be in their homes, in their communities, and in their churches.
I love that. It's like energizing. Like when I hear you say that, like I just like, okay, hold on, my man, I'm about to get hype here. I want to jump out my seat right now.
Yes, sir.
Because this place of empowering men for me, that's the passion and drive, man. I think so many men are looking for more. They want to do more.
Yes.
They want to be more, not just for themselves, but I believe there's someone that you want to do it for, and oftentimes we just don't know where to start. I'm curious to know, Anthony, what was the starting point for you, my friend?
Man, so I've been in ministry. Like I said, I've been married for 21 years. I've been in ministry pretty much my entire marriage. My wife and I got married. I was 20 and she was 19. And so from the get-go, at 19 years old, God radically changed my life. We were getting married in a year, and God just, the light bulb went off. And so ever since then, my goal is just to serve him, right? And so I went into children's ministry straight out of, as soon as my wife and I got married, become a children's pastor. I was a children's pastor for 9 years. After I had done that, I had stepped away for a little bit, and God called me back into not like away from the church, but just away from children's ministry, right? And God called me back into men's ministry in 2016, and so we've kind of been doing this, and it's funny because when I begin to ask God, I'm like, okay, so what is my purpose here? Like, I understand that you've given me this longing to minister to men, right? To encourage and uplift and equip men, right? And he gave me that word, equip, right? He wants me to equip men to become leaders, not only equip them, but to be able to pour into their lives to help them become the leaders that God has called them to be. Right. And so through that, the podcast was born. We had men everywhere. I had men. Really, the podcast started just inside the church. So I'm sitting here trying to figure out. I'm like, okay, so we run a Thursday night men's group. We meet every Thursday and stuff like that. And I constantly had men coming to me. They're like, man, I wish I could be there, but I've got this, I've got that. Legitimate reasons. The kids are in sports. They've got other ministries. They work. Whatever it is. And I was like, how can I bring this content to them where they're at? And I had a buddy of mine. He's like, man, you should you should start a podcast. And so this is, let's see, 2021. And I was like, man, I've listened to one episode of one podcast, so I practically, didn't even know really what a podcast, how it operated, anything like that. And I was like, let's dive in head first, right? And and we've not turned around, we've not looked back. And through that, come the book. We've got other things. We've got a men's conference coming up in January. We've got all these different things that God is just he's just pouring out on the men, and I am so excited to be a small part of it.
We didn't know what we were doing.
No,
I just wanted to make impact. What's funny here is I love what we're doing today, like podcasting. And truth be told, man, I stumbled on it by accident. And when somebody said, man, how you can reach more people if you podcast. And I said, what is podcasting? And when after I did the little deep dive on it, I realized that, dude, I've been doing this for 3 years now.
Yeah.
So I love it. And I love the fact that you didn't look back, man. That's great. So you started with the youth, moved into men's ministry. What have you found has been some of the biggest challenges for men connecting with what you were doing?
Man, let's be real honest. Men are hard to minister to.
Amen
right?
to that. Yeah.
They just are. We don't ever want to talk about anything, right? We're not, and according to culture, we're not supposed to talk about anything. We don't talk about our wounds. We don't talk about those things. And so if we need to be ministered to, we think of ourselves as weak. And that's not the case. We all need to be ministered to. And so that's probably been the biggest challenge that I have faced throughout men's ministry is, you're trying to pour into men and either one, they just don't want to be ministered to, or two, they lock up so tight. It takes so long to break that outer shell, right? Which is, it's totally worth it. I mean, whatever it takes. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's a drag or anything, but that's a challenge. Right. It is a challenge to break through that hard shell and be like, dude, look, brother, you are not the only person going through this. You are not the only person that's dealing with pornography or having problems with his wife or, feel like he's a failure or, whatever it is. You are not the only person doing this. Let me in, let God in so we can get you on the right track of going in the right direction.
Yeah, that's it right there, man. I like that. Not just let me in, but let God in. I often share with men, hey, listen, man, get hold of what God is saying to you. And that way you can find this place of purpose and hope in your life, man. So good. So tell me, how do you break down the walls? What do you do, or you and your team do? How do we get to the hearts of men?
Man, it takes time. You're relational. Men break down, or I don't want to say break down. That men let their guard down when they know that you're a friend, right? We've been so guarded, right? We have to be guarded. Every one of us have been let down by somebody. We've been hurt by somebody. We've been stabbed in the back by people, and so in order to break down that shell, in order to break past that barrier, we have to build relations. And Matthew 28 in the Great Commission, it doesn't say go make converts, right? It says go make disciples. And discipleship is messy and it's hard and it's time consuming, right? But that's what we're called to do. We're not called to just be like, hey, oh great, I led you through the sinner's prayer. Now let me go on to the next guy. No, we're supposed to make disciples. And so building these guys up and edifying them, letting them know that you care more than anything else, right? That you're not there just to take advantage of them. You're trying to bring them closer to God.
So good. Building men up. I often I tell myself I'm a man builder because of this place of working with men in leadership, identifying for themselves what it looks like to really tap into what you believe you've been called to. I'm curious to know, and I want to get into some conversation, but what's in your heart. But I want to go here one quick second, and Absolutely. That is, tell me what's been the greatest joy for you with working in men's ministry?
Man, I tell you what, probably the greatest joy. So 2016, I started a Bible study at our church for the men. And God was just really, it actually started as a Bible study inside my workplace. I was a supervisor at a factory and stuff. And I kind of started in there, and it just grew and migrated to our church. And throughout the years, seeing men that, and this is going to sound kind of silly, that no longer come because they have their own ministries. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So you build them up, and you see them spread their wings, and they start their own ministries, and they become, involved. That is probably the most rewarding thing, to see somebody who's being successful because they allow God to come in and use them. Right. And I was just a small tool. I don't want to pat myself on the back or anything like that. I was just a small tool, but it's so rewarding to know that I played just a small part in them changing somebody else's life.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's real good. And I can only imagine the joy. It's almost, I don't want to compare it to kids, but it's almost like having your own kids and watching them come into their own, right?
It is, yeah.
We know the sweat equity. We know the time that we put in working with men, the long night conversations, those nights where we crying together, we praying together. So yeah, I love that. So good. All right, Anthony, let's transition, bro. Let's talk to the hearts of men, my friend. I'm thinking influence. I'm thinking leadership. But you said every man has influence. How do we help men recognize their influence?
Absolutely. This is probably one of the biggest lies of the enemy, right? In the culture in which we live today, you're either a toxic man or you are a stump on the log. You just sit down, you shut up, you don't, and the truth is that God, every man, whether you like it or not, every man is birthed with a measure of influence, right? And we do not understand the importance of that influence. And what we don't understand is that you will walk it. I tell the men in my men's group all the time, you will walk into a room. You can walk into a room full of people, not say a word. You will leave a measure of influence, right? We have this sense of neutrality, right? Like, like there's this neutral zone, but there isn't, right? Neutrality is a lie. And so, you will influence people either for the good or for the negative, one or the other. And I tell you what, Dwayne, this is something that I wish I would have learned at such a younger age. I look back at, my rebellious times and stuff like that, and I see people that I influenced that no longer live for God, right? Because of the influence that I had on their lives. Now, luckily, some of them have come back to Jesus, but I did not understand the importance of the influence that I had. I didn't know the influence that I had. And so, and the truth is that influence is leadership. And whether you like it or not. And so that means every single man in some form or fashion is a leader.
And I think men need to hear that, because oftentimes when I connect with men, many say to me, well, I'm not a leader.
Right.
And I have to ask this question: why do you think you're not a leader? My job, I work for somebody, or they just can't see leadership isn't position, but leadership is influence. Who are the people that you're influencing in your immediate environment? You got kids, you got a significant other, you got a brother or sister that's following your lead. Listen, you're an influencer.
That's right.
By the measure of leadership. Let me take you back just a little bit. I heard you say this, but I'm just thinking, what were some of the challenges that Anthony went through in his life that really brought him to this place to say, you know what, if this helped me, I want to be able to help men. I want to help build men up too in their life. What's those failures, or what's those lessons learned for you?
Oh man, good grief. We could do a whole podcast on that, right? Failure. Good night. All right. So I went through a very rebellious stage whenever, I was 12, 13 years old or so. I was raised up in church, and stuff like that. My mom and dad got married whenever I was, I don't know, 6 or 7. My dad got saved when I was about 7 years old or so, and started taking us to church and stuff like that. But I was a very angry kid. And so, you want to talk about failures God changed my life at 19. At 17 years old, I'm sitting on the edge of my bed telling God how much I hate him and I wish he'd leave me alone. Right. But yet through that, God still touched me, right? He still uses me. He still, you know what I mean? And so not realizing, my first and foremost, probably my biggest failure would be not understanding my influence. And I'm not talking about just as a teenager, even after I got married, leading my family, leading my wife, my young wife, at the time, having no idea the importance of sex in our marriage, having no idea the importance of my leadership in our marriage, having no idea her place in our marriage, how important she was to me, right? And addiction to pornography and all these things that just haunted me. And I remember sitting, I was leading this men's group, we were probably doing it for a couple of years. And I remember sitting there and we were talking about sex, right? And this is a topic that every man should have to talk about, should have to have a conversation about. And we were having this topic of sex. And I remember the conversation, and I was like, holy smokes, because we began to discuss the importance of sex and why it was important in marriage. I was like, wait a minute, here I am, I'm using my wife just basically to get off, and I'm just being for real, and yet God orchestrated, sex is a celebration of what God created, that marriage, and I had no idea, I had no clue. Well, as a matter of fact, I had to go home and apologize to my wife. I was like, I'm sorry. Like I didn't know. I didn't realize. Nobody had ever told me.
Hold on, help some men here, because you hit something, man. Sex is a celebration in merit towards God.
That's right.
Help me unpack that just a tad bit to make that make sense.
So God created marriage, right? You go back to Adam and Eve, and so if God created marriage, sex is the celebration of marriage, right? It's what brings you together, right? It's what draws a husband and a wife closer together. This is part of the reason, really, when you think about it, sex is worship. And I know it's weird. The first time I ever said that outright, because my view of sex was so skewed. It was so dirty that whenever I said that, I'm like, wait a minute, you cannot put God and sex in the same sentence. Like, you can't do that, right? Because of the culture that we live in. But yet at the same time, if God created marriage, right, he created a celebration of it also, and so to understand that changes the dynamic of sex inside of a marriage. You're no longer looking at your wife like she's just a dime piece, right? You're looking at her like this is something that God has created, that we get to celebrate, that what God has brought together, right? In our society is so messed up when it comes to sex, pornography, and sexual, I mean, good grief, you can't walk out of your door without being slapped in the face, with some kind of sexual innuendos, some kind of sexual temptation, nothing. And so, but I believe that's the reason why Satan targeted that, right? Is because it is literally a celebration of something that only God can create, right? So if you go into, 1 Corinthians, it says a man is supposed to love his wife as what? As Christ loved the church. You cannot do that and have a dirty view of what brings you together. You can't do it. And so it is something that we as men, we have got to get a grasp on, and it also, not only does it change the outlook of your wife, right? You begin to see her as a masterpiece that God has given you. My wife is my favorite blessing that I've ever had, but it also distorts what Satan has created sex to be, right? The temptation, all this stuff. Wait a minute, that's not the way God created that, right? That's not the way God created that. God created that to be holy. That God created that for a purpose, yes. not just for me to get off, not just for my own pleasure. Mm-hmm. God create that has a purpose.
Unlock your true potential with the Leadership Community, where we empower men to embrace self-awareness and authenticity. Introducing the Leadership Community, where we believe in helping men become the best version of themselves. It all starts with self-awareness, and we encourage men to take a step back, pause, and reflect on their thoughts, emotions, and behavior. Embrace their authenticity and break free from societal expectations. Here are just a few testimonies from individuals. Leadership helped me develop self-awareness and embrace my authentic self. And now I feel more confident and fulfilled. Question: are you ready to unlock your potential? If so, join the leadership community today.
Wow. Let me get me woosah on that, because you went hard, bro. You went hard. And I love this. Sex is worship. And I don't think we look at it like that. My wife is my favorite blessing. Listen, I never pictured it like that. You know, to your point, man, I see my wife and not like she a dime piece to me, right? She a dime piece to me, but it made me think. So when we think of sex as worship, and I can see why the enemy has distorted it. You know, my mind immediately went back to this when you were talking. You said you can walk right out the door, but I don't know if you recall, but back in the days, them Daisy Dukes used to drive your boy crazy, right?
Right. Let's go.
So, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Them Daisy Dukes used to drive me crazy. And today you walk outside and it's these tights, you know, and the curviness of the woman. It's so easy to lose that what God created for worship.
Yes.
And we misuse it, man.
So
Such
bad.
a powerful statement you make there, brother. I am so glad you shared that. Really give guys a different perspective. One, about sex, their wives, but more importantly, that when you are intimate, when you are in connection and oneness with your significant other, what you're really doing is worshiping.
That's right.
So powerful.
That's right. You know, because your marriage is the perfect picture of the relationship between Christ and the church. Right. You know, it's that picture. And so it is the most, as far as outside of our direct relationship with Jesus, right? It is the one thing that we should cultivate the most. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. Absolutely. So good. When you found this out, I got to go here. When this came to you, sitting in the men's Bible study, you said I had to go back and apologize to my wife. I'm just curious. Did she know what you were talking about when you said I'm sorry?
No, not at first.
Yeah,
not at first. You know, because you know, unlike me, when my wife and I got married, she was a virgin, right? So all she's ever known is me, and I had painted such an ugly picture. Right. You know, and we've got 6 kids. I mean, you know, so, you know, obviously, you know, it's been good. Right. But,
a dime piece. He can't keep his hands off. I'm not bad, bro.
You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, but whenever I first said that, it kind of caught her off guard. You know, like, what are you apologizing about? And I had to break. I was like, look, you know, I didn't know. I did not realize. You know, the only thing I had ever heard. This is another thing that men need to hear when it comes to this topic. All I had ever heard growing up inside the church, even though I was super rebellious, you know, all this stuff. My parents drugged me to church all the time, and all I ever heard was that sex was bad. You know, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. You're not supposed to have sex. Sex is bad. Well, 15 years old, I find out that sex is fantastic, right? You know, you guys are a bunch of liars, but they never told me the purpose of it, right? The sex outside of marriage is bad.
Yes.
That sex has a purpose.
Yes.
I didn't know that. Nobody had ever told me that, right? Nobody would ever answer that question for me. It was just bad. Well, the act of sex itself is not, I mean, it's not bad. Like, it's meant to feel good for a reason, because it's a celebration.
So true. So true. So good. What were some of the responses of the men in the group? How did they receive that messaging that sex is worship?
You know, was that
a difficult conversation?
It was at first. And since then, with those guys, we've dealt with a lot with like pornography, their pornography addictions and stuff like that. It really kind of hit them at home also. You know what I mean? Like, hey, this addiction that everybody outside of the church said was okay.
Mm-hmm.
I realize now why it's not. We had a lot of those conversations. Man, I have really misused my wife, or I've been having sex outside of I'm a single man or whatever, having sex outside of marriage. I understand now why I'm not supposed to, right? Even though the world says that's acceptable and that's what we're supposed to do, because we're men, that's what we're supposed to do. I understand that it has purpose now.
Mm-hmm. And this purpose is for worship. I want to tap back into influence.
Okay.
And I know that you say that every man needs to understand the importance of their influence. Why is it so important for men to understand the importance of their influence?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to, every man is going to affect somebody, right? I had mentioned about walking into a room, but you take a man who has children. I was talking to a guy today, and I was like, look, I said, Satan, and he was kind of struggling with something. So, we were just kind of counseling, just kind of going through things. Right. And I was like, look, I said, Satan is terrified of you. Satan's biggest fear is a godly man, right? Because he doesn't just have to contend with you. And this plays into the influence. I said, he doesn't just have to contend with you. I said, when you are a godly man, he has to contend with your wife, because she's going to be a godly wife because you set that precedence. He had 3 kids. I'm saying in the future, he's going to have to deal with 3 other godly people because you influenced that. You cultivated that, right? The people around us, our children, our wives, they need us to understand the importance of our influence, right? It's not okay for us to come home and check out. It's not okay for us to, send our wives and kids to church while we sit on the couch and not go. It's not that stuff's not okay. Right. We are to be the leaders. If influence is leader, right? I'll tell you a funny story. So whenever I was a supervisor there at the factory, every morning I did like on Messenger, I did like this Bible study, right? And I would get up and I would study the word and I'd put a little bit on there. We'd discuss it throughout the day, and I had bought my wife a new Bible, and I had asked her, I said, hey, you've been reading that Bible? And she's like, no, I've been busy, whatever. I was like, okay. I didn't chastise her over, I didn't, give her a hard time over, I'm like, okay. And a couple of weeks would go by and I'd be like, hey, what'd you think about that Bible? She's like, man, I haven't had a chance to get into it. And every single day, I'm leaving my Bible out. So she has to pick it up every single day. Right. Because I'm an early person. So I get up at like 4:00 in the morning. Right. She's not, she gets up sometime around 6 or so to get things ready, and stuff like that. So I left my Bible out every day. So she had to pick it up. She knew exactly where I was at, what was going on. Right. And so a couple more weeks go by and I'm like, hey, if what do you think about that Bible? I've been busy. I'm like, okay. Well, then one day I come home and she's laying in bed and I climb in bed and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? She's like nothing. And she just kind of shunned me off. And I was like, well, what are you doing? She's like, I'm trying to do a Bible study with my friend. I was like, okay, right. My influence cultivated that, right? It's the same thing with our children. You want your children to be godly, you want your children to be in church, then you be godly, you be in church. Because without your influence, whatever you put as important, your family will deem it important.
Absolutely.
Right? Mm-hmm. Whatever you prioritize, right? I heard this statement today, as a matter of fact, and it really kind of rocked my world. That prioritizing, there we go. Prioritizing is a form of love. You will always prioritize what you love.
Come on. Yes, sir.
And I was like, man, that's really good. So, but bringing it back to influence, what you prioritize, your family will prioritize. If you prioritize football over church, eventually your family's going to prioritize football over church, right? Going out with the boys and having a good time is more important than your family. Then eventually that's exactly the way they're going to be. When I tell my men all the time, and it's in the book. But if you want your men, your boys, to grow up and treat their wives properly, you show them by example the way that you treat your wife, their mom, right?
Absolutely.
If you want your girls to grow up and know how to be treated, they see that example from you. That's your influence.
Absolutely. Absolutely, bro. So good, so rich. And I think, and to your point, people follow leaders.
Yes.
They do what leaders do. I'll never forget this. This was in my early days of development, trying to be the best husband I can be, because I kept hearing the complaints that I don't do anything around the house. I don't know if you got those complaints. I don't help. I'm selfish. I'm running around doing what I want to do, but my wife's tired. She's cooking, she's cleaning, she's dealing with the kids. Can you at least make the bed, bruh? And that's what my wife used.
I understand.
She was hot with me. And so this place of really becoming the man, what I started to do was I would wake up at 4 a.m. She probably wouldn't get out of bed till a couple hours later. But when I knew she was up and out, I would go back in the room and make the bed. I did that for months. I honestly couldn't tell you. I didn't count the time, but I knew I did it for some months.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, one day, I walked back in the room to go make the bed. And Anthony, the bed was made. And to your point, man, I just believe that if you want to lead your family well, you have to be that model. You have to be the example that they see. Such a rich word to men who's saying, man, I don't know where to start. But start by being the example. What's the area in your life that maybe you need to spend more time in and develop in, and then start developing. Let the family see you reading your Bible. Let the family see you on your knees praying early in the wee hours of the morning, not sitting around watching the ignorant bots. I know so many men are challenged with this place of self-confidence. Was self-confidence a big issue for you? And if so, what did that look like, and how did you overcome and navigate to that place? Right. What can we help men navigate this place of overcoming this thing of called self-confidence or lack of self-confidence?
Right. I wouldn't say it is a problem, right? I think a lot of men do deal with this, because here's the thing. For me, when people look at me, they see that I'm a podcaster, I'm an author, I'm an entrepreneur, right? I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm all these different things. But what they don't know about me is I'm a community college dropout. I'm a 40-year-old community college dropout, right? And I'm the least likely person that God could use. I feel like Gideon, right? I'm the reason, my demographic, I kid you not, my demographic is I should be an alcoholic, right? A deadbeat alcoholic, in the world's eyes. But at the same time, it's my testimony. And for a long time, I struggled with this. I have a buddy of mine, and we'll get to this, the importance of buddies. But I have a buddy of mine. I'd tell people that all the time. I'm like, man, I'm a community college dropout from Southeast Missouri. I don't even talk in complete sentences, but people listen to me on a podcast. You know what I mean? And he's like, dude, you got to stop saying that. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, it's kind of a funny joke to tell. He's like, yeah, but you're really believing that. And so my journey out of self-confidence was to surround myself with people who believed in me, not yes men, not yes men, right? I don't want a yes man around me. Yeah. I want a guy that's going, hey, you're better than that. Stop it. And that, allowing God to put people like that in my life, was life-changing for me, right? Because I couldn't see it. I didn't operate in those circles. And then all of a sudden I have these guys that God has put in my life that are drawing me out of that, and they're like, hey, you are better than this. You are, God is, they're like, look at what you've done, and I think sometimes we masquerade, put a mask on lack of self-confidence and call it humility. You know what I'm saying? Like, I did, well, I want to be humble, right? I don't want to be, but at the same time, I never believed that I was good enough for God to do any of this stuff through. Yeah. Right. Like I said, I mean, good grief. For real, a 40-year-old community college dropout from Southeast Missouri, but yet God has made me an author, a podcaster, an influencer, right? God has done all these things. He used me, even though I was incapable of seeing them in myself. Allowing God, surrendering my life to God, allowed him to do things through me I could never have done myself. And through that, he surrounded me with people that build me up. You know, I also, don't get me wrong, I also have people in my life to keep me humble. You know what I'm saying?
Well, we need them too, baby.
Right? You know, and you want to be humble, write a book. And, you know, but yeah, you know, and so yeah, that's kind of my journey with lack of self-confidence, you know, is, you know, I masqueraded it around like it was humility. But at the same time, I was like, God, there's no way you're going to be able to do this with me. There's no way that I could write a book. There's no way that I could really be a podcaster and have any real influence. There's no way that I could start my own business. There's no way I could do it. And then, like, everything that I thought I could not do, God has done through, right? It's not, it really is not in and of myself that I am capable of doing these things. It is because I have allowed God to operate through my life, and he has turned me into something that I never knew I could be.
So good. With the Gideon complex, I don't care what nobody say. Gideon was a phenomenal leader. A lot of people look at Gideon and say, well, he wasn't a good leader. I beg to differ.
I agree.
I think it took a level of confidence that he didn't know he had,
right,
to be hiding in the wine shed, shredding in the midst of the enemy, looking for what you got in your hand. The enemy is the very essence of why they was raiding the land, because they wanted your wheat. You had enough sense and confidence to gather the wheat and tuck it away. So you wasn't just providing for you were providing for all of Israel. That's a powerful leader. He didn't see it in himself. And much like Gideon, I think so many men at this place, I know I was for a long time, finding this belief in myself, that I could do it, finding this belief that somebody could hear what I had to say, because like you, I don't use full sentences. But, you know, I think when you surrender, right, to this place of surrender, and you just trust God through it all, man, you'll be surprised what God can do through you. I like this, having these buddies, not yes men, but men who are going to hold you to your greatness. Talk to me about your buddy, man.
Oh man, good grief. Which one? You know what I'm saying? So I'll put it like this. Every man needs other men. We all need other men. Every man needs people in their lives that they can lean on, that can push them, right? You know, a couple of examples. You know, one, I say every man needs a Paul and every man needs a Timothy, right? And every man needs a Silas. Every man needs somebody that is pouring into them, right? The Paul that is going to kick them in the seat of the pants whenever they're doing something wrong, keep them in correction, right? That is going to be the spiritual father for them, right? Everybody needs a Silas that you can lean on, that's a brother, that's going to go out in the mission field with you. And every single man should have a Timothy, somebody that you are a Paul to. Every single one of us, because it keeps us accountable. It keeps us in check, because we have to be that spiritual leader for them, right? Now, those positions will always change. The goal is that your Timothy will outgrow you. And the goal is that you will outgrow your Paul, right? We're not training them up to be lesser than us for the rest. We're training them up to be men of God, right? And so those will change, right? You want that Timothy to grow up and be this great Paul for somebody else, and while you adapt another Timothy to pour into, right? We're talking about making disciples. But you know, I come to this revelation one day that, you know, when we talk about like things, the importance of like men's group and the importance of having other men in our lives, I look at Jesus, right? So when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, right, and he's praying and he's just, you know, Father, if there's any other way, right, and he goes back out to the edge of the garden, and Peter, James, and John are sitting there, they're sleeping, and Jesus says, could you not pray with me for 1 hour? Right. And I, for the longest time, I thought he was trying to teach them a lesson, but Jesus was in turmoil. He knew what was coming. He understood what was coming, and he needed their comfort. Right. We're talking about the creator of all things, right? The God of the universe in his flesh, right? He needed the comfort of those men in his life. Those were his boys. He took Peter, James, and John everywhere, right? He was confiding in them. And if Jesus needed them in his flesh, how much more do we need people in our lives? I was discussing with a guy yesterday, a different guy yesterday, and we were talking about, I can always tell when a man is struggling because they will withdraw, right? They will pull themselves away. I can pinpoint it every single time, and and it's because the enemy, the first thing he will try to do is tell us that nobody else understands, that nobody else cares, right? Because he wants to isolate us, right? We're not Jesus. Right. Look what happened when he got Peter isolated. Right. When Peter was caught out there outside of the gate, he could see Jesus. He could see him. And yet he denied him. Right. Caught him off guard. Right. If he can isolate us, if he can pull us away from everybody else that keeps us accountable, that we have to be accountable to, if it's like whenever you see like a lion hunting, they don't go after the pack. Right. They go after one that's left off to the side. And it doesn't even have to be wounded necessarily. It doesn't even have to be sick. All it has to be is distant from the herd. That's it. And that's what Satan does to us. And man, it is so important for us to have other men in our lives that we can, that not only that we grow from, that we teach, but also that we can confide in. Man, I'm having a hard time. Man, this temptation is so difficult right now. Man, I'm struggling with pornography, or man, me and my wife are fighting. I need, and I'm not talking about just anybody that's going to, I'm talking about spiritual men that's going to give you wise counsel. That's going to be like, look, dude, what does the Bible say about this? Let's open up the Word of God. What does it say about your marriage? What does it say about sexual immorality? What does it say about your anger? What does it say about fill in the blank? We need men like that in our lives that are not afraid to be like, dude, you're wrong, right? We need that. We need that in our life.
Yes, we need to find that Paul, Timothy, and Silas. To your point, and I love how you articulate this, and that is, if Jesus needed the comfort of other men, how much more do we need other men in our lives to help us navigate these tough times that we're experiencing? Man, such rich insight there from you, Anthony. Listen, I want to transition, brother. I got to highlight you, bro. Framework for Biblical Masculinity.
Let's go.
Dude, listen, this about to be my new favorite book.
You're just buttering me up.
I'm telling you, man. I just, what we started was I do a book club each Saturday morning, and we bringing guys in, and we having conversation around this, bro. Listen, talk to me. What initiated this book, Framework for Biblical Masculinity, and what do you want men to glean?
Yeah, absolutely. So, fantastic question, man. And I'm super glad that you're enjoying the book, that it's ministering to you and hopefully the other men, that's the whole point of it. Right. So the reason why I wrote the book was in my men's ministry, I have noticed through counseling and just different things that there are so many men out there that we're talking about men inside the church. This is a discipleship tool. It's not an evangelism tool. I mean, it could be used for that, right? But this is what it's geared towards. There are so many men inside the church that want to be good husbands. They want to be good fathers. They want to be leaders. They want to be all these things, and they have no idea, because not even the church, right? The vast majority of our churches are ran by women. 20% of churches in America have men's ministries. 110% of churches in America have women's ministries. It's almost as if the church has been geared towards the woman, right? And so you have these men that they're like, man, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. You have all this stuff from even inside the church. I'm not saying the church is bad. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But then you step outside of the church, and the entire world is coming down on the man, right? They're completely trying to take away his influence, trying to take away the importance of a man. And we're talking about, and if you've read you're just in chapter 2, you already know, we're not talking about in this decade. We're talking about for the last 100 years, taking the man out of the home during the Industrial Revolution, and wars and feminism and sexism, all of this has taken a toll on masculinity, right? And so now we live in this culture where men, they're like, I don't know what it is to be a man. I have this culture right here that's telling me that in order to be a man, I've got to have a lot of sex, or I have to, you can't cry, you can't do any of this stuff, you can't, you got to be a masculine man, and stuff. And then and then whenever I try to be a masculine man, they're telling me that I'm toxic and I'm confused, I don't know what's going on. And then inside the church, they're like, you just need to do something, but I don't know what to do, right? And so if I begin to ask God, I'm like, if we just had a framework that we could build upon, right? And I love the way that they did the book. If you notice the frame, like the building, right?
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what I had imagined, that it would be like a frame that you could take and you could build upon. Right. So just laying the foundation, and I wrote it. I remember the editor, he asked me, he said, what is your vision for this book? Dwayne, I told him, I said, I want, when a man picks up this book, he goes, I can read this. Right. There's not, I try to make sure that there's nothing intimidating about it. It's short. It's to the point. I'm built that way. Right. I don't like fluff. I don't like all that stuff. I'm direct. I like people just, don't sugarcoat nothing for me. Give it to me the way it is. Right. I want all meat and potatoes. And so that's the way that I wrote the book, was just meat and potatoes. Right. You give them the information they need. They can find the rest of it out on their own. And, in trying to entice them to want to dig deeper into the Word of God, to want to look up, the scriptures that are in there, to want to look up, why is it important for me to be inside the church? Why is it important for me to be in politics? Why is it important for me to understand apologetics, right? Why is it important for me to be a good husband, a good father, to set this framework that then they can be like, okay, what does this look like? And in the book, my whole goal is to point men to Jesus, right? Because Jesus is our supreme example of masculinity, right? And so to point to them and just lay this groundwork, lay this framework that they can, okay, so I know where to start at. Now I can build on this.
That's good. That's so good. My next question for you was, what does biblical masculinity really look like?
Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, you said it. You hit the nail on the head at the end there. Talk to me. What would a biblical husband actually look like and leader look like?
Yeah. And so, all right. So we touched on this a little bit beforehand. Whenever I think of a biblical father, I go directly, or a biblical husband, I go directly to, you did say husband, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Whenever I think of that, I go to 1 Corinthians, right? We're to love our wives as Christ loved the church, right? When we quote those verses, we like the one that says, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands, right? We like that part.
Absolutely.
Come on, what I mean? Yeah. Women submit, what I mean? Like we like that. But the mandate on a man's life, right? Understanding that you play the role, and I really want to emphasize this. If our marriage is the perfect picture between Jesus, the relationship between Jesus and the church, in our marriage, we play the role of Jesus. Right? How did Jesus love the church? He gave it everything. But here's the thing. Not only did he give his life, we like to talk about that, but Jesus was a servant leader. He served the church, right? And so in the same way, we are to serve our wives, right? You know, everybody likes to talk about like the wife needs to serve the husband. We are to serve our wives because Christ served us, right? You look at like Jesus washing the disciples' feet and Jesus touching the leper. Jesus, I don't know if you ever watched any of the Chosen, but there's a scene early in the first season, and Jesus is out. He's like healing people, he's doing all this stuff, and all this stuff, and the disciples kind of stand around, and Jesus comes in, and he's so exhausted, right? He can like barely take off his shoes, and he's trying to lay down at the end of the night, and he's just completely drained in his flesh. He was just completely drained, right? And Jesus served us. What greater example can you be to your wife than to serve her? Right? I don't know about you, but the society that we live in, the vast majority of our wives have to work, right? My wife's a teacher, stuff like that. When she comes home, and vice versa. Well, let me go here first. When she comes home, if I'm off, the house will be clean. The dishes will be done.
And
there'll be supper on the table.
Mad now. You're going to make some dudes mad.
But seriously, I mean, she worked hard too, but I tell you the reward of that, right? My wife will do anything for me. She will go to the ends of the earth for me because I served her first. Just like, we love Christ because he first loved us, right? When we love our wives properly, it will come back and return, right? Because what is a wife? A wife is a multiplier, right? She will multiply anything that you give her. You give her hate, she will multiply it, right? Mm-hmm. You give her yourself, she'll make children, right? She will multiply it. You give her love, and she will multiply it. When you properly love your wife, she will multiply.
Man.
Sorry, bro.
No, for real. I think, and this goes back to influence, bro.
100%.
The very essence of what you talk about, or what was in your heart tonight. This goes right back to influence. I believe that this place of serving, this servant leadership model you speak of, I think that's what men need to be. I said, don't make men mad, and you start talking about how you clean up and you do this and you do that. But that's what it takes, I think, if you want to lead effectively in your home.
That's right.
And so many men in this place of being broken. But I think if we simply dial back, man, and tap into this place of influence, what influence truly looks like, serving, or that servant leadership model. And I give 5 practices. I believe men should model the way. They should enable others, allow others to interact. It's 5 practices of effective leadership. And I think when we practice this model in our homes or in our lives, to your place in point, man, you want to see things increase or multiply for the good, man. Get to this place of serving your wife. Oftentimes men come in the house and we the king of the castle, baby.
That's right.
I'm here, or you, to your point, women work all day. She come home and now we want her to serve us.
Yep.
I'm guilty.
I have been too.
I'm guilty. We got to see things a little different when we really understand what Christ came to do, who Jesus was when he walked this earth, and how the impact that he left behind for men to follow. You're right. He is the greatest biblical masculinity example that we can take to really bring impact into our life. Listen, I know we can keep going on and on, but listen, share with the men here. Tell them one more about Real Men's Ministry, where they can learn about what you're doing, the podcast, the whole kit and caboodle, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So the podcast is Real Men Talk. You can get it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, all the good stuff. And I really encourage men to go check that out. Of course, the book, Framework for Biblical Masculinity. You can get on Amazon, or you can go to our website, which is www.realmenministries.us. You can follow the link on there. Of course, you can find Real Men Ministries on Facebook, TikTok, all those good things. We also have a men's conference coming up in January 4th in St. Louis. You'll find more information. We've got a website that's getting ready to come out. It'll be on our website. So just kind of keep updating, checking out the website and stuff like that. We're going to put it on our website and all that good stuff. It's coming up. It's Real Men Discipleship Conference. And so it's geared towards discipling men and bringing them, giving them resources to take back to their local church. And so we've got that going on, and look, God is doing so much. He's doing so much right now. It is absolutely phenomenal, and I love it. I love being able to be used by God. Right? It's not about me. It's not about what I can do in and of myself. It's about allowing God to work through me. And one last thing, Dwayne, I want to throw this out here is another reason we have to understand our influence. We have to understand the servant leadership, all these different things. If we want our country to change, it starts inside of our home, right? You change the home will change the church will change the community. It's a chain reaction. We have to understand that it starts inside of our home.
And that's the biggest reason why so much attack on men. If we can get the man out the house, if we can get him following down the street after them Daisy Dukes, we lose everything. There's no structure. And being the head, we can come back into these homes, fellas, and lead by the example, be the example that our families need. So powerful, man. I don't want to go no further. I'm going to hush on that note. Listen, go find out what Anthony Curnutt is doing. Go pick up the book, Framework for Biblical Masculinity, on Amazon, or go visit the webpage, www.realmenministries.us. Listen, Anthony, I want to say thank you, brother, for taking time, rocking with us on the Men of Vision podcast, and being so gracious with your time, my friend. I truly appreciate it. Listen, gentlemen, I want to say this to you. Realize this, that you have everything you need to take your life to the next level. That's simply because your success is in your hands. Go out and have a phenomenal day with purpose, and God bless.